The 2011 Norway attacks, also called July 22nd, Norwegian, 22, July or 22/7 in Norway, were two domestic terrorist attacks by far-right extremist Anders Behring Breivik against the government, the civilian population, and a workers' youth league, AUF, summer camp, in which a total of 77 people were killed. The first attack was a car bomb explosion in Oslo within Regjeringskvartalet, the executive government quarter of Norway, at 15 hours 25 minutes and 22 seconds CEST. The bomb was placed inside a van next to the tower block housing the office of the then Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg. The explosion killed 8 people and injured at least 209 people, 12 severely. The second attack occurred less than 2 hours later at a summer camp on the island of Utøya in Tyrifjorden, Buskerud. The camp was organized by the AUF, the youth wing of the ruling Norwegian Labour Party, AP. Breivik, dressed in a homemade police uniform and showing false identification, took a ferry to the island and opened fire at the participants, killing 69 and injuring 32. Among the dead were friends of Stoltenberg and the stepbrother of Norway's crown princess Mette-Marit. The Utøya attack is the deadliest mass shooting by a lone individual in modern history. The attack was the deadliest in Norway since World War II. A survey found that 1 in 4 Norwegians knew someone affected. The European Union, NATO, and several countries expressed their support for Norway and condemned the attacks. The 2012 Jorv report concluded that Norway's police could have prevented the bombing and caught Breivik faster at Utøya, and that measures to prevent further attacks and mitigate adverse effects should have been implemented. The Norwegian police arrested Breivik, a 32-year-old Norwegian far-right extremist, on Utøya Island and charged him with both attacks. His trial took place between April 16 and June 22, 2012 in Oslo District Court, where Breivik admitted carrying out the attacks but denied criminal guilt and claimed the defense of necessity, jus necessitatis. On August 24, Breivik was convicted as charged and sentenced to 21 years of preventive detention in prison with the possibility of indefinite 5-year extensions for public safety, the maximum sentence allowed in Norway. Preparation for the attacks. Breivik was preparing for the attacks from at least as early as 2009, though he concealed his violent intentions. Failed attempt to buy weapons in Prague. Breivik spent 6 days in Prague in late August and early September 2010. Following his internet inquiry, Breivik noted that Prague is known for maybe being the most important transit site point for illicit drugs and weapons in Europe. Despite the fact that Prague has one of the lowest crime rates among European capitals, Breivik expressed reservations about his personal safety, writing that, before his trip there, he believed Prague to be a dangerous place with many brutal and cynical criminals. He hollowed out the rear seats of his Hyundai Autos to have enough space for the firearms he hoped to buy. After 2 days, he got a prospectus for a mineral extraction business printed, which was supposed to give him an alibi in case someone suspected him of preparing a terrorist attack. He wanted to buy an AK-47 type assault rifle, a Glock pistol, hand grenades, and a rocket-propelled grenade, stating that getting the latter too would be a bonus. Breivik had several fake police badges printed to wear with a police uniform, which he had acquired illegally on the internet, and which he later wore during the attack. Contrary to his expectations, he was unable to get any firearms in the Czech Republic, commenting that it was the first major setback in his operation. In the end, he concluded that Prague was far from an ideal city to buy guns, nothing like what the BBC reported, and that he had felt safer in Prague than in Oslo. Arming in Norway and through the internet. Originally, Breivik intended to try to obtain weapons in Germany or Serbia if his mission in Prague failed. The Czech disappointment led him to procure his weapons through legal channels. He decided to obtain a semi-automatic rifle and a Glock pistol legally in Norway, noting that he had a clean criminal record, hunting license, and 2 guns, a Benelli Nova 12-gauge pump-action shotgun, and a Weatherby Vanguard .308 bolt-action rifle, all ready for 7 years, and that obtaining the guns legally should therefore not be a problem. Upon returning to Norway, Breivik obtained a legal permit for a .223 caliber Ruger Mini 14 semi-automatic carbine, ostensibly for the purpose of hunting deer. He bought it in late 2010 for €1,400. He wanted to purchase a 7.62 by 39 mm Ruger Mini 30 semi-automatic carbine but decided, for unknown reasons, to buy the Mini 14. Getting a permit for the pistol proved more difficult, as he had to demonstrate regular attendance at a sport shooting club. He also bought 10 30-round magazines for the rifle from a United States supplier and 6 magazines for the pistol, including 4 30-round magazines in Norway. From November 2010 to January 2011, he went through 15 training sessions at the Oslo Pistol Club, and by mid-January, his application to purchase a Glock pistol was approved. Breivik claimed in his manifesto that he bought 300 g of sodium nitrate from a Polish shop for €10. The Polish ABW interviewed the company owner on July 24, 2011. Breivik's Polish purchases initially led to him being placed on the watch list of the Norwegian intelligence, which did not act because they did not believe his actions were relevant to their terror concerns. He had also planned a last religious service in Frogner Church, Oslo, before the attack. Breivik Geofarm. On May 18, 2009, Breivik created a sole proprietorship called Breivik Geofarm, a company established under the fictitious purpose of cultivating vegetables, melons, roots, and tubers. The real purpose was to gain access to chemicals and materials, especially fertilizer, that could be used for the production of explosives without arousing suspicion. The place of business was given as a Modern Headmark. On May 4, 2011, Breivik purchased 6 tons, 13,000 pounds, of fertilizer through Geofarm at Felleskjøpet, 3 tons, 6,600 pounds, of ammonium nitrate and 3 tons, 6,600 pounds, of calcium ammonium nitrate. According to neighbors, all the fertilizer was stored in his barn. After conducting a reconstruction of the bomb with an equivalent amount of fertilizer on the farm in Amat, police and bomb experts concluded that the bomb had been 950 kilograms, 2,090 pounds, about the same size as the one used in the 2002 Bali bombings. There was significant debate in Norway about how an amateur could acquire such substantial amounts of fertilizer and manufacture and place such a lethal weapon in the middle of Regjeringskvartalet all by himself. The conclusion by Felleskjøpet was that there is no legislation to keep agricultural businesses from buying as much fertilizer as they like, and that there was nothing suspicious about Breivik's purchase. This was confirmed by the director of the Norwegian Police Security Service, Janne Christensen, who stated, "Not even the Stasi could have prevented this attack." The company listed at least 2 Swedish employees on the social networking site Facebook, but it is uncertain whether these people existed. In April 2011, he reported moving from Oslo to Volstua farm in the municipality of Amat, about 9 kilometers, 6 miles, south of the community center Rena, on the east side of Glomma. His agricultural company was run from the farm and gave him access to ingredients for explosives. His 950-kilogram, 2,090 pounds, car bomb exploded in central Oslo on July 22, 2011, where it killed 8 people. He had between 1,000 and 1,500 kilograms, 2,200 and 3,300 pounds, of additional material that was left on the farm and could be used for the construction of a second bomb. Weapons training. Beside visiting firing ranges and countries with relaxed gun laws to sharpen his skills, Breivik's manifesto says that he made use of the video game Call of Duty, Modern Warfare 2 as a training aid while using World of Warcraft as a cover for his extended period of isolation. He also said that he honed his shooting skills using an in-game holographic sight similar to the one he used during the attacks. Oslo bombing on July 22, 2011. On 22. July 2011 at 15:25:22 sest a bomb detonert in regjeringskvartalet, sentral Oslo. The bomb was placed in a white Volkswagen Crafter and parked in front of the H block, housing the office of the Prime Minister, Ministry of Justice and the Police, and several other governmental buildings, such as the Ministry of Petroleum and Energy, R4, Ministry of Finance, G block, Ministry of Education and Research, Y block, and the Supreme Court of Norway, behind the G block. The Crafter was registered by surveillance cameras as entering Grubbegata from Grensen at 15 hours 13 minutes and 23 seconds. The van stopped at 15 hours 13 minutes and 43 seconds, 200 meters, 650 feet, before the H block. It stood still with the hazard warning lamps on for 1 minute and 54 seconds. The driver then drove the last 200 meters and parked the van in front of the main entrance of the main government building. The van was parked at 15 hours 16 minutes and 30 seconds. The front door of the van opened 16 seconds later, and after another 16 seconds, the driver stepped out of the van. He stood outside the van for 7 seconds before quickly walking away towards Hammersborg Torg, where he had another car parked. The driver was dressed like a police officer and had a gun in his hand. A police helmet with a face shield was covering his face. Breivik was not positively identified at this time. The explosion started fires in the H block, H blocka, and R4, and the shockwave blew out the windows on all floors, as well as in the VG house and other buildings on the other side of the square. The blast was caught on many security cameras. The streets in the area were filled with glass and debris. A cloud of white smoke, which was reported as a fire, continued to burn at the Department of Oil and Energy. The blast was heard at least 7 kilometers, 4.5 miles, away. At 15:26, the police received the first message about the explosion, and at 15:28, the first police patrol reported arriving at the scene. At the same time, news agency NTB was told that the Prime Minister was safe and not hurt. A witness called police at 15:34 to report a person in a police uniform holding a pistol in his hand, entering an unmarked vehicle, a Fiat Doblo. Information, including the vehicle's license plate number and description of the suspect, was written on a yellow note and hand-delivered to the Police Operations Central, where it lay for 20 minutes before the witness was phoned back. The license plate number was not transmitted on the police radio until 2 hours later. Following the explosion, police cleared the area and searched for any additional explosive devices. Through media outlets, police urged citizens to evacuate central Oslo. Police later announced that the bomb was composed of a mixture of fertilizer and fuel oil, ANFO, similar to that used in the Oklahoma City bombing. Effect on transportation. Immediately after the explosion, the area surrounding the damaged buildings was cordoned off and evacuated. People were asked to remain calm and leave the city center if possible, but there was no general evacuation. The Oslo Metro remained operational, and most of the Oslo tram network was also running, although sporadically, except for the line through Grensen, the street between Professor Aschehougs Plass and Stordervet. Buses also continued to run, although at least one articulated bus on the number 37 line, which stops outside the Ministry of Finance, was commandeered to evacuate the walking wounded. An email communication with the BBC from a traveler indicated that police were conducting searches of suspicious cars on the road to Oslo Airport, Gardermoen, which remained open. The Gardermoen line between Lillestrøm and Oslo Airport was shut down after a suspicious package was found close to the tracks. The same happened at the offices of TV2, which were evacuated after a suspicious package was found outside the building. Utøya mass shooting. Attack. Utøya mass shooting on July 22, 2011. Approximately 1.5 hours after the Oslo explosion, Breivik, dressed in a police uniform and presenting himself as Martin Nilsson from the Oslo Police Department, boarded the ferry MS Thorbjorn at Utøya in Tyrifjorden, a lake some 32 kilometers, 20 miles, northwest of Oslo, to the island of Utøya, the location of the Norwegian Labour Party's UF youth camp. The camp is held there every summer and was attended by approximately 600 teenagers. When Breivik arrived on the island, he presented himself as a police officer who had come over for a routine check following the bombing in Oslo. He was met by Monica Bose, the camp leader and island hostess. Bose likely became suspicious and contacted Trond Berntsen, the security officer on the island, before Breivik killed them both. He then signaled and asked people to gather around him before pulling weapons and ammunition from a bag and firing indiscriminately, killing and wounding numerous people. He first shot people on the island and later started shooting at people who were trying to escape by swimming across the lake. Survivors on the island described a scene of terror. Survivor Dana Barzengi, then 21, described how several victims wounded by Breivik pretended to be dead, but he came back and shot them again. He spared an 11-year-old boy who had lost his father, Trond Berntsen, during the shooting and stood up against him and said he was too young to die, as well as a 22-year-old man who begged for his life. Some witnesses hid in undergrowth and lavatories, communicating by text message to avoid revealing their positions. The mass shooting lasted for around an hour and a half, ending when a police special task force arrived and Breivik surrendered, despite having ammunition left, at 18:35. The shooter used hollow point or frangible bullets, which increased tissue damage. Breivik repeatedly shouted, "You will die today, Marxists, liberals, members of the elite." Bose's husband and one of her daughters, who were also present, survived. The youngest victim, New Zealand-born Sheridan Svebakbone of Drammen, was 14 years old. 16-year-old Andrine Bakken Espeland of Sarpsborg was the last victim, nearly 1 hour after the shooting began. Residents in a flotilla of motorboats and fishing dinghies sailed out to rescue the survivors, who were pulled out shivering and bleeding from the water and picked up from hiding places in the bushes and behind rocks around the island's shoreline. Some survived by pretending to be dead. Several campers, especially those who knew the island well, swam to the island's rocky west side and hid in the caves, which are only accessible from the water. Others were able to hide away on the secluded Kjærlighetsstien, love path. 47 of the campers sought refuge in Skellestua, the schoolhouse, together with personnel from the Norwegian People's Aid. Although Breivik fired 2 bullets through the door, he did not get through the locked door, and the people inside this building survived. 2 Chechen teenagers, Movsar Zemayev, 17, and Rustam Dadov, 16, had pelted the gunman with rocks in an attempt to stop him. The teenagers said they then decided that it was too difficult to stop the gunman and better to save lives. They discovered a cave-like opening in a rock where they hid 23 children from Breivik. Zemayev, who kept guard outside, also dragged 3 youngsters from the lake who were close to drowning. Former Prime Minister Gro Harlem Brundtland, whom Breivik said he hated and, in a pun on the more or less ironic epithet Landsmorderen, Mother of the Nation, referred to in his writings as Landsmorderen, Murderer of the Nation, had been on the island earlier in the day to give a speech to the camp. After the attack, Breivik stated that he originally wanted to target her specifically, but because of delays related to the renovation of Oslo's Central Railway Station, he arrived after she had already left. Rescue and emergency response. The first shot on Utøya was fired at 17:22, and the emergency medical services were informed about the shooting 2 minutes later. 1 minute after that, the police in Oslo were informed. They immediately tried to reach Utøya as quickly as possible, but did not have a helicopter that could take them straight to the island. By 1730, Delta, the police tactical unit in Oslo, was on the way to Utøya by automobile. One of the first to arrive on the scene was Marcel Gleff, a German resident of Ski staying at Utøya camping on the mainland. Recognizing gunshots, he piloted his boat to the island and began throwing life jackets to young people in the water, rescuing as many as he could in 4 or 5 trips, after which the police asked him to stop. The Daily Telegraph credited him with saving up to 30 lives. Another 40 were saved by Hege Dahlen and Toril Hansen, a married couple on vacation in the area. Dahlen was helping from land while Hansen and a neighbor camper made several trips to rescue people in the water. Several dozen more were rescued by Casper Alog, who made 3 trips to the island. Alog, a local resident, received a telephone call that something terrible was happening on Utøya and requesting help. He initially thought the call was a prank but acted anyway. Altogether, some 150 who swam away from the island were pulled out of the lake by campers on the opposite shore. Delta reached the meeting point at 1809 but had to wait a few minutes for a boat to take them across. They reached Utøya at 1825. When confronted by the heavily armed police on the island, the gunmen initially hesitated for a few seconds. When an officer yelled, "Surrender or be shot," he laid down his weapons. Breivik called the 112 emergency phone number at least twice to surrender, at 1801 and 1826, and continued killing people in between. The police say Breivik hung up both times. They tried to call him back, but did not succeed. When the police arrived at the scene, they were met by survivors begging the officers to throw away their weapons, as they were afraid that the men in uniforms would again open fire on them. During the attack, 69 people were killed, and of the 517 survivors, 66 were wounded. The Norwegian police did not have helicopters suitable for transporting groups of police for an airdrop. The one they had was useful only for surveillance, and the helicopter crew were on leave. When the local police arrived at Utøya, less than 30 minutes after the first shot was fired, they could not find a suitable boat to reach the island and were ordered to observe and report. AUF's own ferry, the 50-passenger MS Thorbjorn, which Breivik had used to go to Utøya, was not available as it had left the island shortly after the first shot was fired, carrying 9 people, including AUF leader Eskil Petersen, who feared there might be more terrorists in the area. The police had to use their own rigid-hulled inflatable boat, RHIB, which was located in Honfoss and needed to be transported to the lake and launched. When Delta boarded the RHIB, it took on some water and, after a few hundred meters, the engine stopped due to water in the fuel. They then took over a civilian boat sent to assist them, and shortly after, a faster civilian boat arrived. 4 Delta officers boarded the boat, and the civilian couple took the police to Utøya. The police have been criticized for not using a helicopter, for not immediately getting into small boats, and for endangering the couple who drove the civilian boat. On arriving at Utøya, the police arrested, in addition to Breivik, an innocent 17-year-old survivor, Anzar Zhukov, who represented the Akershus branch of the UF. The youth, who had witnessed mass murders in Chechnya as a child, was reportedly stripped naked and locked up in a jail cell located only meters away from the cell housing the self-confessed killer. He was suspected of being an accomplice because his haircut was different from that shown on his identity document and because he did not react to the carnage with the same tears and hysteria as most of the other survivors. He was kept in custody for 17 hours. Lawyer Harold Stubell criticized the police for failing to contact the youth's family, who feared he was killed, and for interrogating him without a lawyer present. The attacks were the deadliest in Norway since World War II, and a survey found that 1 in 4 Norwegians knew someone affected by the attacks. They are also the fifth deadliest terrestrial terrorist attack in Western Europe, behind the 2004 Madrid train bombings, the 2015 Paris attacks, the 2016 Nice truck attack, and the 1980 Bologna bombing. In Oslo, 8 people were killed in the explosion. The blast, shockwave, and debris immediately killed 6 people, while 2 others died shortly afterwards from their wounds. Of the 325 people estimated to have been in the government buildings, around them, and in the surrounding area, at least 209 received physical injuries from the blast and debris. While most injuries were relatively minor and could be treated at the local casualty clinic, 12 people sustained more serious injuries. 10 were sent to Alevel University Hospital, OUS, Alevel, with moderate to serious injuries, and 6 with critical injuries, and 2 to Aker University Hospital, OUS, Aker. A doctor at one of the Oslo University hospitals reported treating head, chest, and abdominal wounds. Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg was at his official residence near the Royal Palace, preparing for a speech he was scheduled to give at Utøya the next day. Norway's finance minister, Sigbjørn Johnson, was on vacation in Denmark at the time. Fewer people were in the area than usual because the bombing occurred in July, a common holiday month for Norwegians, and it was Friday afternoon, so most government employees had already gone home for the weekend. In Utøya, casualties. The attacks were the deadliest in Norway since World War II, and a survey found that 1 in 4 Norwegians knew someone affected by the attacks. It is also the 5th deadliest terrestrial terrorist attack in Western Europe, behind the 2004 Madrid train bombings, the 2015 Paris attacks, the 2016 Nice truck attack, and the 1980 Bologna bombing. 8 people were killed in the explosion. The blast, shockwave, and debris immediately killed 6, while 2 others died shortly afterwards from their wounds. Of the estimated 325 people in the government buildings, around them, and in the surrounding area, at least 209 received physical injuries from the blast and debris. Most injuries were relatively minor and treated at a local clinic, but 12 people sustained more serious injuries. 10 were sent to Alevel University Hospital, with 4 having moderate to serious injuries and 6 with critical injuries, while 2 were sent to Aker University Hospital. Hospital staff reported treating head, chest, and abdominal wounds. Prime Minister Jens Stoltenberg was at his official residence near the Royal Palace, preparing for a speech he was scheduled to give at Utøya the next day. Norway's finance minister, Sigbjørn Johnson, was on vacation in Denmark at the time. Fewer people were in the area than usual because the bombing occurred in July, a common holiday month for Norwegians, and it was Friday afternoon, so most government employees had already gone home for the weekend. The scope of the events on the island was initially very confusing, and the first official figures estimated at least 10 fatalities. As the evening progressed, eyewitness reports suggested a higher number. At approximately 3:50 CEST on July 23rd, NRK1 and TV2 broadcast a live press conference from Oslo's Sentrum Politistasjon, where Norway's National Police Commissioner Øystein Mæland stated the number of fatalities at Utøya had reached at least 80, with expectations that the count would increase. By July 25th, a police spokesperson revised the death toll on Utøya to 68, noting that the number of missing was still high and casualties could be as many as 86. On July 29th, police announced that one of the severely wounded victims from Utøya had died in hospital, bringing the death toll from the island massacre to 69. On July 26th, the Norwegian police began releasing the names and dates of birth of the victims on their website. By July 29th, the names of all 77 victims, 8 from the bomb attack, 69 from Utøya, had been published, with the last victim found on the 28th. Of the 69 people who died on the island, 57 were killed by gunshots to the head. In total, 67 were killed by gunshots. 1 died falling from a cliff while trying to escape, and 1 drowned while trying to swim away from the island. Breivik fired at least 186 shots and still had a considerable amount of ammunition left. In the aftermath, of the 564 people on the island at the time, 69 died, and at least 110 received physical injuries. An estimated 50 people were treated at a locally set-up casualty clinic for relatively minor injuries like cuts, bruises, and hypothermia after fleeing and swimming from the island. The weather on Utøya was cloudy and rainy, with temperatures ranging between 14 to 15 degrees Celsius, 57 to 59 degrees Fahrenheit. The shortest distance to the mainland was around 600 meters. 60 people were transported to surrounding hospitals, with 55 having serious to critical injuries. The chief surgeon who treated the wounds at one of the hospitals had never seen similar injuries in his 23 years of practice, noting that the bullets were extremely fragmented. 33 people who were directly hit by bullets survived, but a 23-year-old man who was shot died 2 days later from his injuries. The 564 people on the island were from across Norway and some foreign countries. The deceased came from 18 of Norway's 19 counties and a woman from Georgia. Wounded individuals were from throughout Norway, including Svalbard. With casualties from Oslo included, an average of a quarter of Norway's population knew a victim, according to a survey. Several of the dead and wounded, or their parents, were personal friends of high-ranking government ministers. Trond Berntsen, an off-duty police officer and stepbrother of Norway's Crown Princess Mette-Marit, was the first to be shot dead. Perpetrator. The suspected attacker was identified by public broadcaster NRK and several other Norwegian media outlets as Anders Behring Breivik. He was arrested on Utøya for the shootings and was also linked to the Oslo bombing. He was charged with terrorism for both attacks. According to his attorney, Breivik acknowledged responsibility for both the bomb and the shooting during interrogation but denied culpability, asserting that his actions were atrocious but necessary. At his arraignment on July 25th, Breivik was remanded into custody for 8 weeks, with the first half in solitary confinement. He requested an open hearing and to attend it in a uniform of his own design, but both requests were denied by the presiding judge. Mental health. Following his arrest, Breivik underwent examination by court-appointed forensic psychiatrists, who diagnosed him with paranoid schizophrenia and concluded he had been psychotic at the time of the attacks and was criminally insane. Although criticized in newspaper debates, the report was approved by the Norwegian Board of Forensic Medicine after review by an extended panel of experts. Breivik initially expressed surprise and felt insulted by the report's conclusions, but later saw it as providing new opportunities. Following criticism, the court approved a second psychiatric examination in January 2012. The second report declared Breivik sane in April 2012. Ultimately, the district court's 5-judge panel agreed that Breivik was sane. Political and religious views. Breivik is linked to a 1,518-page compendium titled 2083, A European Declaration of Independence, attributed to Andrew Behring. The document was emailed to 1,003 addresses about 90 minutes before the Oslo bombing. Analysts described Breivik as holding Islamophobic views and a hatred of Islam, considering himself a knight dedicated to halting Muslim immigration into Europe. The manifesto's introductory chapter defining cultural Marxism is a copy of Political Correctness, A Short History of an Ideology, by the Free Congress Foundation. Major parts of the compendium are attributed to the pseudonymous Norwegian blogger Fjordman. The text shares similarities with the Unabomber Manifesto, replacing terms like leftists and black people with cultural Marxists and Muslims, respectively. The New York Times noted American influences, including numerous references to anti-Muslim American Robert Spencer and extensive citations of his works. Other sources of inspiration mentioned in the manifesto include Bat Year, Pamela Geller, Konrad Elst, and Daniel Pipes, among others. It also cites Bernard Lewis, Edmund Burke, Mahatma Gandhi, Thomas Jefferson, George Orwell, and various contemporary columnists. Aftermath and legal proceedings. After the attacks, Anders Behring Breivik was charged with terrorism for both the Oslo bombing and the Utøya massacre. During his initial court appearance on July 25, 2011, he was remanded in custody for 8 weeks, including solitary confinement. Breivik's requests for an open hearing and to wear a uniform of his own design were denied. Breivik underwent psychiatric evaluations, initially diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and deemed criminally insane. This diagnosis was later contested, and a second evaluation in April 2012 declared him sane. The court ultimately ruled that Breivik was legally sane. Breivik's manifesto and actions were linked to extreme right-wing ideologies, including Islamophobia and xenophobia. Despite his claims of inspiration from jihadist groups, he acted alone. The trial concluded with Breivik being found guilty and sentenced to 21 years in prison, with the possibility of extension indefinitely as long as he is deemed a threat to society.